Hi, I'm Christian. So my talk is called Forget About Being a Specialist, Let Curiosity Drive Your Boat. So you already presented me, but let's start by maybe going through my background. Who am I? What am I? So I initially studied to become a graphic designer. I studied in a city called Tshaped in Sweden. It's about 160 kilometers south of Stockholm. And during my studies, I chose to become a graphic designer because I thought I liked the idea of like using design for some higher purpose, or whatever that means. But during my studies, I already started noticing that I got interested in some other fields which were not exactly what we were learning at the time. For example, it was web design, and not only web design, but actually coding as well. And if you're a designer and you like to design, you should really try designing with CSS. It's very fun. So this also led me into like wanting to learn about the complexity of things such as interaction design. Because once you start delving into these things, you have to understand how interaction works. And this kind of appealed a lot more to me than trying to theorize on what color perception is and how things can change our perspectives and so on. So after I finished studying, I moved to Stockholm, and I was ready to start my life as a working designer. And I really thought that I would meet a lot of other people just like me who had the same interest as me. So I went to meetups, I went to conferences and any other kind of events. But one thing that happened was that I didn't actually meet these people who were just like me. I would either meet designers who didn't really understand the tech that they were talking about or designing for. So we didn't have so much in common there. Or I would talk to maybe tech people, developers who were a lot more into that than I was. Here are some examples of these sort of conversations where, I have no idea what that meant. So yeah, that was pretty much what happened. But having these conversations, what happened also was that they would come to me with this question, like trying to understand why I didn't understand, because I had all these different sort of skills or things that I wanted to talk about. And so they asked me, what exactly is my specialty? What is my main driver? And I was standing there like, I have no idea. I've never actually asked myself this. And it didn't even stop here. This was also like, when you become a designer, for example, or you become any sort of creative, you want to learn more and you want to learn from the community. So I went to these blogs and any others, like Twitter, of course. And this topic was very common there as well. So, and frankly, I just really didn't like the idea of defining myself that way. Because really, like, what is a specialist? And if we look at just the definition of the word specialist, you can say that it's a person with great knowledge or skill in a very particular field. And field, what is the field? As most of you know, there can be many levels to what field actually means. So unless you're actually having anything to do with any particular field, you can't know how truly specialized you are. So today, I'm going to talk about the word specialist in a very broad sense, and I'm going to let you guys, or peeps, decide what that means to you. So, how many here consider themselves specialists? Can I get a raise of hands? Yeah, not a lot. But at the same time, you could ask yourself, why wouldn't you want to be one? It would be so much easier to just describe what you do, what you're good at, and just tell people that, and they would know exactly what you do and what you're good at. So what I'm basically trying to say is, it simplifies things. Back in 1776, this man called Adam Smith wrote a book. It was called An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, or commonly known as Wealth of Nations. And what he did here was he was reflecting upon what industrial revolution had meant for economy. And in this book, he described what would be one of the main drivers in economic growth for centuries to come. He called this the division of labor. And what this means is during the Industrial Revolution, what you saw were a lot of these like projects being split into many smaller tasks performed by different people. And these people became specialized in these different tasks. And you have examples of this even today. You have projects with large projects with a lot of specialists working on it. And I mean, I don't think anybody's missed the long-ass credits at the end of movies, which pretty much depict this. And what these projects, or what they try to strive for, is basically higher quality. Because you could say that quality improves when more of the work that goes into a final product is performed by people who are good at those tasks. So specialists, it may seem, will produce better quality. So 1 year after my studies, I met with some friends in a bar in Stockholm. One of my friends, or actually these were friends from studies, so they were former classmates, all designers, and one of them brought a friend of theirs who was studying to become a doctor. So we were having a conversation, and the topic came up where they asked him what he wanted to specialize in, and he told us he wanted to become a cardiologist. And my friends started asking him, so why do you have to study for so long if you already know what you want to be? And he explained to us that even specialist doctors have to become general doctors before they can even practice a specific field of medicine. My friends were not so satisfied with this answer. They really thought that it was a waste of time. And as they discussed this, I was also thinking back to conversations that I had back in high school already, where it was conversations where friends of mine were saying that why should I even learn things that are not relevant for whatever my career is going to be? Why should I learn math if all I'm going to be doing is sketch on paper? And they didn't really want to spend any more time on learning things that were not particularly relevant. But to me, what this doctor was saying, it made so much sense. I mean, why wouldn't you want to basically race on the fields and see what you like, what you prefer, and then you know what you've chosen in the context. Has anybody here seen the show The Crown?
Yes.
Okay. So for those of you who don't know the show, it follows Queen Elizabeth II of Great Britain. It's following her life and the people around her. I have to admit, I've only just started watching it, but there was already a scene in one of the first episodes that really, really spoke to me or struck me. In this scene, you see a young Elizabeth. She's maybe 10 years old, and she's having a private lesson. And in this private lesson, she's learning about royal politics, and then she asked her teacher, So do you teach this to other pupils of yours? And he answers, no, of course not. And she asks, so what do you teach them? So he goes back, grabs a few exam papers, and shows these to her. And she looks at them and notices that it's a bunch of math, and quite complex math as well. So she asked the teacher, shouldn't I be learning this as well? And the teacher just answers, no, ma'am, this is very undignified for royalty, not necessary for you. So jump ahead a few years. This is the next scene. And she's sitting there. She's now the queen. She's older, of course, and she's sitting with her mother. Her mother is reading the newspaper. And her mother says, oh, this Mr. Einstein is changing his mind again. And she says, oh, really? What exactly is he changing his mind about? The mother looks at her a bit confused and looks down at the newspaper. And yeah, that detail is a bit unclear to me. But everybody's making a tremendous fuss about it. And that was interesting to me because it begs us to ask what the downsides to really specializing in something might be. For example, teamwork. What about the smaller teams, especially teams that self-organize? And what I mean is, for example, here at Futurist, we don't have a specific project manager who helps us with all these tricky communication things between different specialties. So we have to be able to work and communicate very well if we're gonna work together. And so what a specialist sort of being a specialist might have the downside of having a much harder time collaborating, because you have to collaborate, you have to really understand why your team is doing what they're doing and really understanding that. And this could happen if you're too specialized. So could this be, so what I'm saying is, could this be the birthplace of innovation, not being a specialist? No, probably not. But there are a few cool examples of what going outside of your specialty could mean. In 1989, Japan had their bullet train, but they had one problem. This bullet train went at really high speed, so it was solving that sort of issue of getting somewhere from A to B in a very fast way. But it also created a really loud sound when it came out of tunnels, because it pushed all the air out and created a sonic boom. And this was really disrupting neighboring communities. So they hired some engineers to work on this, and it so happened to be that one of these engineers was a bird watcher. So he saw an opportunity here, and just coincidentally, he thought of a specific bird, a bird called the kingfisher. What this bird does is it goes at really high speeds into the water to catch its prey, but doesn't even create a splash. So what they did was they looked at what made this bird be able to do this, and they realized that it could be the beak. And so they copied this shape and tried it out first in a little model, and they noticed that it made a huge difference. So that's what we have today. They have this train that has the same shape as this beak, and that actually solved this sonic boom problem. Today, this is called biomimicry, and you can see this in a lot of different fields. And there's even a field now that is biomimicry, where they take things from nature and apply them to real-time things. Okay, so earlier I told you that when I moved and wanted to become this working designer and learn things, I went to blogs and I saw this question a lot about being a specialist and so on. So I'd like to give you an example of that. Let me introduce you to the T-shaped model. So for those of you who don't know this, This model depicts this vertical axis represents the deep knowledge that you might have in a specific skill. And maybe you're a master of this skill. And the horizontal axis are other skills that you're not the best at them, but you're probably comfortable performing these. And you might be thinking, wait, how does this represent all of us? And I'll tell you, very good point. Bravo, my fellow creative. It doesn't. It really doesn't. But the community has obviously thought about this as well. So just quickly going through a few others, like the O-shaped designer, for example. This is, you could actually say this is the truest generalist. Really not a specialist in anything, knows a little bit about all of their skills, and we usually call these generalists as well. You also have the H-shaped designer. This could be somebody who might have switched careers at some point, and now they have two main skills, and in the middle you have some other skills that bridge this gap. And there are many, many more. I don't know about the question mark, but probably. But let's shift the focus here. How does this all apply to companies? I mean, I am aware that this has many, many hues, and I'm not going to go into all of these, but I'd like to narrow down on the context of startups, a very hot topic nowadays. So a startup is known for being lean, agile, and a bunch of other buzzwords. Basically, this means that they have to be flexible and be able to adapt easily. And they might also have a limited budget and some other limitations. And I actually found a pretty interesting visualization on this by a man called Emmett Connolly from Intercom, where he depicts what the need for specialists during a company's lifetime would be. As you can see in the beginning, generalists are a lot more interesting for companies. This because he says is that curiosity is one of the main drivers for early stage companies or startups, you could call them whatever. Because without them, he says, a company might be limited to the knowledge that the team brings with them. And if you don't have curiosity, they won't be able to take on a lot of other tasks, which usually happens in these companies. To end this, I would like to bring my take on this. So my personal thoughts on the matter. I'll do this with 3 points. Number 1, being a specialist is about being able to become one. What do I mean with this? A lot of us might not have the opportunities to really specialize. Most creatives will actually have a very hard time finding an environment with the conditions needed to truly specialize. For example, you might have a doctor, again, a doctor who is a specialist in something, and this doctor lives in a very big city and will most likely have enough cases or patients that require this special skill. And so this will mean that they will have the opportunity to truly sort of develop this specialty in depth. But then on the other hand, you might have a doctor who is also a specialist, but lives in a smaller area. And this means that they probably don't have as many patients that require this special skill. And what happens is that they will have to practice a lot of general medicine. Yeah, that's basically it. So remember, you might want to be a specialist. You might even be a specialist, but unless you have the conditions to really go deeper into this, you won't be able to. Number 2, being a specialist does not mean that you are boxed. What I mean by this is you're not compartmentalizing. We are not robots that are programmed to just do one thing, and we cannot even go a little bit close to that. like we said before, unless you have anything to do with a certain field, you won't know how specialized you actually are. And the final one, number 3, is that being a specialist is BS. I mean it. If there is really just one thing that I think that you should or could choose to be or do, is letting curiosity drive your boat. Thank you. Any questions?
What is your direction now? Where are you going now?
My direction? Well, here at Futures, I'm a UX designer, and I actually like that title, mainly because it really doesn't make sense. It encompasses so many things that I can choose to do whatever I want, really. But for me, I'm actually already looking into learning more about the business side of things, and I think this happens to a lot of us. We go from a very deep knowledge to maybe trying to understand more of it and going broader. Anybody else? Yes?
Is it maybe not also about like identifying different areas and then just really becoming a specialist within those, or like picking areas that you're interested, and then you have to go deep because, I don't know, otherwise it's very superficial, I suppose.
Yes, and this is a very common theme that gets discussed a lot. This being a Jane of all trades or master of none. It's about this. You might be interested in so many things, but according to some, unless you actually go deeper into those, you can't really say that you're a master of that. And this is where I'm also going. Like it's not always that way, and you can't really know how, if you actually are a specialist, until you maybe you've been doing this for years and still haven't still noticed that, oh, I can specialize in this other specific thing inside of this specialty. So it's really, there's so many layers to this that that I also think that what I'm trying to say is that it's really okay to just choose not to really dive deep into a specific topic or a number of topics. Yes.
Very interesting perspectives from both sides, and I just want to add that I find it. I mean, now we look very much as a personal, sort of from a personal perspective. But I like to look at it from a team perspective because I find it very productive when you have a group of very specialists, very, to some extent, stubborn in a good way, to having them discuss together a topic, because that's where disruption, innovation, new crazy ideas happen, because of this mix of everyone pulling to their sides, and if everyone is kind of touching a little bit in every topic. I mean, you can take design from industrial design to UX design. If everyone understands a little bit from each topic, they kind of go around in the same kind of ideas. But if everyone is like, the industrial designer pulling towards this side, and then the interaction design towards this side, and then the business side and so forth, then you have very diverse and very interesting discussion. So this team perspective, how it's put together, maybe it's another side from this discussion, like this self-discussion of should I be more specialist or generalist?
Absolutely, it is kind of this same thing that I was trying to do. Like, so you're showing there are a lot of pros and a lot of cons. So really, it's really hard to say that if a team with specialists is going to produce something a lot better than a team of, let's call them generalists in this case. Because it might be so that you're pulling to your own specialty and really having that focus or that perspective, and others might have the same perspective. But I still like to argue that it doesn't always mean that they have the same perspective, even if they don't have their own specialties. I think that even driving discussions, I can just take my example where I noticed that I have a lot easier time discussing things with developers, for example, just because I also have this side of it. Maybe not the very deep one. I'm not a tech specialist in any specific sort of, it can be languages or anything like that, but I still have some understanding. So, and yeah, I could even say that maybe my specialty is something inside of design, but I don't like to think of myself that way. I really like to just, if I'm interested in something, that's what I'm going to strive for, and that's what I'm going to try to learn. And if I notice that, oh, hey, this other thing was a lot more interesting, then I'll go for that. But I do notice the benefits of understanding what people in my team are talking about, and especially the you could say the global understanding of it, what we're all striving to do.
I get when you talk about the being a generalist in a context of in a design studio or let's say a UX design. If I think about my career, I started as an industrial designer, jumped into automotive design. So that was like a big jump. So I never sketched cars, right? And then so now I have 7 years of experience. But from automotive design, when you be inside a real automotive design studio, it's, to be honest, just about cars. And let's say if you want to switch to even motorcycle design, I don't know if the companies really think like if you send a portfolio with cars and you say, even though it's the same thing, like you can sketch a car, you can sketch a motorbike. Most of the time, I don't know if the companies or the corporates really think it that way. They want guys who just do exactly what was. I know it's a circular rut, and most of the automotive guys think alike. So, yeah, I'm really in this dilemma that when you say be generalist, yeah, I get it from the context of UX because it's a digital platform. Even if you're designing for a bank or you're designing for a retail store, there's a,
Yeah.
And I really don't know how I could jump from this thing to another domain, even if you are interested in career-wise. So right now, how I do is just by freelance. But the other option, I don't know.
It's very interesting that you say that, because just food for thought here. But could it be that these companies and the job positions that they put out there are the ones driving this specialist theme? Because a lot of times these companies actually, they're looking for this specific person. Sometimes they also look for these, these unicorns that know everything. But yes, a lot of times they actually have these very specific positions which where they're actually saying, we're looking for a specialist in this thing. And for example, here they might be looking for, we want this, not a car designer, we want an actual motorcycle designer.
No, I mean, just to give you a random example.
Yes.
Like, let's say I studied industrial design, and then let's say you have an opening up at Futures, and I'm interested in UX, and because the base of problem solving is the same. Like, you have a problem, and then you kind of figure out a way to. Like, I'm a little doubtful that if I send up a resume saying that I would like to be a UX designer at Futures, if there's like a real tangible thing going on there.
Well, I'll give you this. We actually do have a designer who went from industrial design into car design and is now one of our UX service designers. So it is possible.
Good to know.
Yes?
I have a quick question. Thank you, Christian, for the talk. I also share the idea that you should not live in your bubble and you should expand your skills. However, there's something I noticed in our generation and the generation that everyone else says we're ruining everything, the millennials, that we want to date everyone, live in every city, and work everything all at the same time. So my question is, would you say that the rejection of specialization is a fear of commitment?
Fear of commitment. That's harsh. It might be so. That's if you look at it. I mean, we do criticize millennials a lot, but I'm a millennial, and I feel like hey, shit, why not embrace that? It is really about, if we have these opportunities that us millennials have nowadays, why not take advantage of it? I wouldn't say that it's a lack of commitment. It's really like taking advantage of the opportunities that life gives a lot of us. But also keeping in mind that maybe if we want to specialize in something, it might not happen. What I meant with this point was for example, if you work for a company like Google, for example, they do have these opportunities for very like specialists working in a very specific thing, and they will have work to do. But if you take most companies, which are a lot smaller, they will need people who don't just do, I only do like specific illustrations in this style, because they will have to get out of that comfort zone. And so if you're not curious enough, it's going to be a problem. That is my opinion on that. But like I showed here, there's a lot of pros and cons. But no, I wouldn't say it's a lack of commitment. Yes?
I think aside from the corporate sort of term of being a specialist, you could also consider it kind of like a drive. Like for me, it's always been sort of like I always considered myself a specialist, even though I like didn't have a specialty. Like now I could consider myself maybe, but before not. But I think it's really, for me, it's always about curiosity. So if you're so curious that you're willing to dig so deep into a topic that you're really not satisfied until you somehow through a wormhole pop up somewhere else, and then you have a second specialty. I really think it's not being curious and being a specialist is really not an opposite. It's more like, where does your curiosity drive you? Does it drive you like in a like broad sense? Are you interested in like everything a little bit, or are you really interested when it comes to details?
Yeah, I think you put into words pretty much what I also think. I'd even like, I go a little bit further into that, where I agree, you can be so curious that you even dive so deep into a specific specialty that you even get lost there. But what I'm trying to say here is that I don't get the whole discussion on what is my specialty. To me, it's just taking that away and saying, my curiosity leads me either here, either diving really deep, or it leads me into all of these things. Is that kind of what you wanted to say?
I don't know. For me, it's really like, I feel like it gets interesting as soon as you kind of dive underneath the surface, you know? Like as soon as you know a little bit more than average, then it actually gets interesting. And then you dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And then, of course, other fields also interfere with this, because, you know, the world is not completely disconnected. So you might be a specialist in, for example, my dad, he went from being a translator to being a security software specialist, which seems like a complete turnaround, but it's actually not. Like, it's connected.
He's a big change.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Yeah. So yeah, I think you could really dig into one topic and then pop up somewhere, and then like dig into that topic and pops up somewhere else, and yeah, it's also curiosity driven.
Yes, definitely. I agree. Yes, quickly.
Yes, a little bit different point of view. There's an international recruitment company called Oakland Center, and they just, one of the latest Harvard Business Reviews, they had a long article about how they do assessments of the top management, who is the most suitable for their next jobs. And it's of course part of the recruitment process, but also when people are already in, they assess that who will go upwards. And they had different qualities, 4, but on top of it, they had one which was curiosity. So curiosity defined that what is the potential of this person. So if people didn't have that, then they will not move forward. And they gave examples of people's or cases where there was a person who was already more advanced, but he was lacking this side, and there was a person with less skills, but he had this quality of sort of trying for the new things, and in that specific case they chose this talent that was sort of a more forward-looking person. But of course you also need support in then building whatever qualities or skills that you're looking for. So that's one point. And the other point I wanted to say is that sometimes it might be that the people in the organization might lack understanding of what the people in the team or who they are managing can do. So if they themselves have a broad understanding, then they will put people in boxes, and then it's the job of each individual to sort of do the sort of the exploration and do a little bit of work to get to the different positions. So it's not necessarily coming from the company, but you have to sort of try it yourself.
Yeah, like saying that you're a specialist in something kind of simplifies it also for how you present yourself. Yes?
Well, I would have a question. Well, I don't consider myself a specialist, but I wonder if, in terms of career development, when you have such a clear goal of where you want to be, then it seems that you have to take the specialist path, right? So for those that have chosen to be a specialist or to become very skilled at certain thing, how does that have worked for you? In terms of, like it really fulfilled my career drivers, or am I lacking, or am I missing something? I'm curious about like how does that work for specialists?
Does anybody feel up for that? It's a very good question, and it's a little bit what I wanted with this talk. There is no defined way of doing things, but it's really driving these discussions that really interest me, and finding out what other people think about the topic of, should I become a specialist in this? Should I do this? Where am I going? And how am I going to get a job if I do this other thing? Because these are some of the drivers that really get us going with these discussions.
Yeah, I like to kind of look back to the high school thing. So I actually think that every one of us was born with a level of curiosity. And for me, it's a question of how schools work with children and then grown-ups basically to keep the curiosity alive instead of actually putting us into situations where, do I have to learn this thing? Is it going to be any use for me? Because that's like turning us completely around from like what we were born to do, right? We are curious creatures. So what's your point on that?
Well, a story about me. So I grew up in Mexico, and I went to school there, and then I moved. I also lived in Sweden for a while, and I went to school in Sweden. And even the educational system was very different. And that was, so I grew up in Mexico, and I moved to Sweden to study my 8th grade. And the first thing that I noticed was that we were learning, just the level of math was a lot higher in Mexico than it was in Sweden. They were still looking at, and they were going to do this up until they go to university, just the A-level math. Well, we had already started with like, I don't know what the translation to their system would be, but it's kind of like, I think, C or D. So we were going a lot faster, and we were learning about a lot of different things, but we also had other consequences of the educational system where I knew very little about world history, because we were kind of like, in Mexico it's kind of like in the States, you just learn the history of Mexico, and that's the most important history to know. And my the people I studied with in Sweden, they had learned so much more about world history, and that was so there were differences in this whole educational system. But what really struck me was actually when I discussed with people. So I did high school in Mexico, but then I discussed high school with Swedes after high school. And they were telling me these stories, like, and the way they told it was very interesting to hear, because they were saying sort of like, I went to when I went to high school, I'm so happy that I was able to choose my specific field, and this was my specialty, because that's how it works there, and I think this is how it works in a lot of other countries. You get to choose your specialty at the beginning of high school, and your high school years are going to be focused on that, and this changes sort of your curriculum. But in Mexico, you don't. I think it's changing now, but back then it was you kept going to school and you were learning about everything. And to me, that was a pretty good way of doing it. Like, I still thought it was pretty important to understand physics and biology, even though I knew that I'm not going to do these things, but I really find it good to know. But then my Swedish counterparts, they were really saying that I would have never chosen to go to high school if that was the case. I didn't want to go to school anymore. And first of all, it was very interesting to see how they thought it was a choice. I mean, I don't think it's a choice. You won't get a job that you want. But yeah, that they also saw, like, they were really strongly thinking that if I don't need to know this for my career, then there's no point in knowing it. And that was quite interesting, and honestly, it provoked me. I thought it was very provocative. Yes?
So first of all, thank you very much for that interesting topic. So my take on this is actually, let curiosity drive your boat, and then if it takes you to speciality, go for it. And if you realize you are a person with a broad understanding of things, then go for it. Because it maybe depend on the person you are, so some people might be really, able to dive into it and really, really love it, but get, really confused and distracted by lots of other elements, above it. And some people might always be, find it easier to connect, and draw the bigger picture. And so from practically speaking, because my background when I studied was all about corporate design, I'm a communications designer. So, and the way I've worked the last 10 years was always kind of following the same scheme, that I would sit down with the client and do a workshop about who they are, what they want, what their messages should be, and what the audience is going to be. Translate that into a big idea, which then, applies on colors, a logo, the typeface, the type of photography they use, and apply to a brochure cover, a website, 5 pages, the logo, the business card, and so on. And I've done that. And after the presentation, I would start designing the website, design the brochure, and design everything. But last year, I realized when I was doing the website that it had become so complex, because life is changing so much, social media, responsive, web design. I realized what I've done for the last 10 years, which was fine with my curiosity and understanding of, a special field. I was actually at a moment where I now need a specialist, because I have the broader picture, I have the big idea, I have the colors and everything, but now I'm struggling to be fast enough to actually develop a website, because I need to look up what's the actual size I need to design it in, what's the resolution, it's too much technical detail. So my take would be that people with a broad understanding should work with specialists to get a really, really good project out for their clients, because you need both. So yeah, so it's like teamwork between people with big ideas, and then people really, really love to dig deeper and try new things in one field.
Yeah, first of all, you got exactly my point. I do want to... I really do think that if you're curious in one specific field, you can go into that. And if you're not, then you're the broader sense. But I do agree that it might be a good idea to have people with this broad understanding, and then looking for specialists when it's necessary. And it's kind of what I'm also trying to say. It's really not, I'm not saying that being a specialist is a bad thing. It's just this whole thing of calling ourselves specialists, because it can mean so many things. But what can happen a lot of times if you become a specialist is that you might have some very general understanding of other fields, but with time these might fade away if you only focus on this one specialty. Or, I mean, yeah, like you said, everything is changing constantly, and even I feel like I haven't been able to use my coding skills for a year now, and I'm already feeling like I don't understand these new things, and I need to keep up with that all the time. But I'm also curious enough to be fascinated by it, that, oh, okay, there's still things to learn there, and I like that. But I think it's a very interesting point that you make, and it's part of this, like, creating this discussion that I. Thank you. Anybody else?
Maybe it's a nice point in time to actually say thanks then. Thanks for this super nice talk. Yeah, thanks so much. I think this is really what it's about, sparking an interesting discussion and getting everyone involved like this. Super cool. Thanks so much. I learned something, I took something away. But we'll be back next month. The topic is courage. So I would really like to see every one of you joining us again. We'll be announcing the location and who will be speaking there. If you feel like anyhow you can kind of contribute to this whole concept as a speaker, as a location, as a sponsor, I don't know, as a graphic designer, whatever you like, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be in contact then. But let's close it with that and say thanks to Futurists and thanks to Christian.
Thank you, Creative Mornings.